What's shaking, cats and kittens? I'm Rob Lee from Getting to the Truth in This Art. And this podcast is brought to you by our presenting sponsor, Bazaar. Bazaar is a gift shop for those seeking the strange and unusual. Got morbid curiosity? Got an interest in natural history? Bazaar's got you covered. Bazaar specializes in antique medical equipment, jewelry, prints, funerary antiques, and many other morbid gifts. The inventory is ever-changing. I'm wearing a Great Death's Head moth pin, and I'm enjoying this hand-poured candle called Overgrown Cemetery. It's great. It has the studio smelling awesome. Head on over to 3534 Chestnut Avenue in Baltimore, it's in that Hamden neighborhood, and see what they got to offer at Bazaar. Tell them Rob Lee sent you. Welcome to Getting to the Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee, and today's guest is my friend and artist, CBT, Christine Buckton Tillman. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks, Rob. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So part three. So Chroma colors. We were talking colors a little bit. Don't trust the pink vest is what I'll say in real life. We were talking about vaccine vests, but let's talk about your work. Describe your work and your background to the fine folks out there who may be uninitiated.
Okay, so I am a visual artist who works in lots of different materials. All of my art revolves around how I see the world and what I think is interesting in the world and what I take from it. And I work for people who sort of need to visualize that. I work in sculpture and in painting and also in collage.
Yes. And
sculpture, I'm going to say also includes installation. We'll say that.
And also a bit of a fashion plate, I'm noticing. It's always an interesting sweater or top piece that's going on there. Very vibrant, popping colors. If you wear neutral colors and then wear one thing that isn't, then everybody thinks that you're very colorful as a dresser. This is legit. This was a Halloween costume at one point, but I also wear it as... It is a leopard sweater that I bought off of Amazon by searching leopard sweater and yellow. And it was my Halloween costume last year. And now I just wear it as a legit person. I am currently wearing 5 different shades of gray. Yep. Morehouse shirt, unaffiliated. Never went there.
They don't always match the grays, but go on.
No, they don't. I mean, that's what it is. That's my personality. Unmatching grays. So I read that some of your early work is inspired by connections to advertisements and connections to algorithms, amongst other things. Describe some of your favorite pieces of advertisements.
Well, I think you say advertisements, and to me that really reads as print or media based. And I think when I say advertising, I'm going to include visual merchandising as a piece of advertising, and that's a pretty huge influence for me. And so visual merchandising would be how stores and retail spaces organize their spaces to get people to want to buy things, whether it's a window display or really, a whole store is visually merchandised. So whether it's walking into Target and seeing how things change based on the seasons, or sweaters at the Gap, all folded and organized by color. I'm really profoundly interested in objects and object display and how that relates to retail spaces.
Yeah, I think you're right. Merchandising is a part of it that often gets ignored when people think of advertising. If something isn't positioned in a certain way, it's I don't want to buy that. And the way that things are placed, how can I put it? I'm tall, so something that's at my I don't care about anything below me. So if you're trying to get me as your audience, place things up. But people or your average person is going to be considerably shorter than me. So I think the placement of certain things and how it's aligned, maybe by color. I would imagine if you were to go down the cereal aisle, and judging by what you work with in the Chroma kind of setup, how's that experience for you? How's the cereal aisle experience for you?
Okay, but I'm into the grocery store. I'm an impulse buyer, right? If I see it and I want it because it's sparkly or something, I will. Yeah. I am a sucker for all of those things. But I think that arrangement is a way that we can make sense out of things. Another big influence for me would be natural history museums, not uncomplicated spaces, but especially I am really fascinated with gem and mineral displays, as well as dioramas and how sort of taxidermy is displayed, and sort of that. I like artifice and I like fake nature. So like, to me, a natural history museum space is like taking real nature and then like moving it entirely out of nature to this like other display space. But all of those things, and sort of natural history as a discipline, if you could call it that, is really based on the idea that people can make observations about things and learn from it, right? So it is a discipline based on people's own observations, right? So when you see, when you see these two skeletons next to each other, you learn something about the nature of that creature just by seeing them together. And I think that that's also related to the same way, right? Like I might see this one sweater next to another sweater and make an association that way. Or if you say cereal, or trying to think of like maybe it's also connected to, I really like the seafood area of the grocery store. Okay. Like those are some of my favorite displays.
Yeah, I think that comparison piece is important, because you just see it like by itself. It's just like, oh, this is just a sweater or what have you, or whatever the item is. But you see in comparison, it's like, oh, suddenly you're like, the texture's here. This fabric is different. This feels different. Oh, this feels more expensive. Or if you see it next to like another piece of fabric, like, oh, this is just a shirt. This is not the same. This is not as important. Or you start attaching different values on it based on the comparison, I think.
When I was describing my work, I kind of left a big piece out. In addition to the drawings and the collages and sculpture and installation based stuff, I've been in a long-term collaborative artistic partnership with a woman named Lisa Solomon out of Oakland, California. And she and I, since 2015, have worked together on a project called Chroma, in which we crowdsource objects with color. We ask people to give us things that have color in them, which everything does, as long as it's not transparent. So like fully transparent. I mean, you can have like transparent blue and it's still blue. But so we ask people for things that have color in them, and then we organize them by color. And people may have, Baltimore people may remember a show that we did in 2015 at Gallery CA. And we have worked together on that project again in San Francisco. And then there is a permanent version of the installation at the Wharf in DC. And we've worked on it together again for some private collectors as well. But so what that project does is we gather these things by color, and then we organize them by color in these big, expansive wall-based groupings. And similar to what we were just talking about in terms of like how things are organized and making connections. I mean, anytime you put two things together, people are going to make connections between them. So there we really enjoy doing that by color. So, certainly the color transitions, how red might transition into orange, in a lighter value through some cool, like salmony stuff happening. But so it's not just like how those pieces are really fun, because it's not just how the color transitions, but it's also seeing objects butting up next to each other. So a pair of scissors next to a broken watch band next to, I'm thinking about orange right now. And in a version of Chroma that we did, we got like somebody's prison bracelet, like a prison ID bracelet that had been orange and had like the photograph on it and some text. So it was really interesting to end up putting all of those things together and having them seen together through the lens of color.
I would like to start seeing like Power Ranger action figures from like the 90s, just there. If somebody gave it to us, we would totally put that in there. There's Pez dispensers. There's definitely some Star Wars if somebody's willing to give it up and give them to us. Okay. What I'll do is I'll sanitize some items from like a Goodwill or something. I think I have some old toys in the crib, and I will send them to you, because back in the day, like the toys that they gave us, it was like, here's a piece of plastic. We didn't put too much work into this. This is going to be repurposed for something later. It's going to be great. It's going to be better than the actual function as a toy. So it's like, here's a Ninja Turtle sword or something. Here's just something that's just one color.
Totally. Or even if it has more than one color, right? A friend of mine is traveling the country in an RV with her children and this year as sort of a response to what life and school is like right now. And she was given a box of things for her younger son, like little plastic things that you might think a 2 to 3 year old would like. And that it's not necessarily RV friendly to have a box full of those things to sort of pare down. So she, I hope the son doesn't listen to the podcast because he does not know that she sent me the box. But within it, I'm thinking about it because there was these objects that were sort of like transitional objects, right? It was, or at least that's what Lisa and I call them. So it had more than one color in it. So it was blue. It was like a little truck, and it was a blue little truck. And on top of it had this like really, actually kind of like the color in your background, that's like teal on the top. Yeah. And so you could really use that quite well because it would fit sort of the blue to green transitional area because it sort of had both in them. So if that makes sense.
Baltimore, you moved here, and tell us about that move here and what your thoughts and impressions were of Baltimore before moving here.
I came to Baltimore with my now husband, right? So he had grown up here, and before we moved here in 2002, I had visited maybe 2 or 3 times, and I found Baltimore to be sort of like a really fun and delightful and accessible sized city. It seemed to me that it had all the great things that you wanted in a city, but was small enough to still be accessible. And frankly, I was immediately taken by sort of like some of the kitschy charm of Baltimore. 20-something Christine was very smitten with lawn ornaments, and Baltimore was the first. I'm a Midwesterner, so nobody in the Midwest would like astroturf their front yard, and it's the first time I had seen that, and that, like, I got West Coast friends who it's like, it's not that unusual. But I had never even seen it in Florida. And I was immediately smitten by the kind of place that would think that was a good move.
That's funny. That's funny. We do have that charm. Well, I mean, it's in the name. I mean, Charm City. So in comparison to like other places you've been in, other places that you've been in that scene, the art scene, how would you say Baltimore kind of compares to those?
Well, I think one of the things that drew us to choosing Baltimore was that, like, I find Baltimore's art scene to be really accessible. And at the time that we moved here, which is, dating myself here, if we moved here in 2002, it was a city that, like, within the first year of us living here, we were both able to show work, and we were both making work that was like needed to be shown to exist, right? I was doing a lot of installation-based stuff, and my husband was sort of doing like very project-based work that was not object-oriented, and so both of us needed a space to show work, and that was something that was able to happen for us pretty quickly after moving here, which and it's a scene that, like, we were able to meet people, and it was really friendly and welcoming, and I think continues to be as well. So it's a pretty accessible city in that regard, especially for two people who didn't go to school in Baltimore, right? I think we were deciding between Baltimore and Chicago, and that's where I grew up. But I didn't go to school in Chicago. So, it would have taken us a couple of years to make the connections that the crew that went to school in Chicago already had made. It wasn't, Baltimore was just a much more open and accessible and excited about what people are doing kind of scene.
I think that's the thing that assessment there is something that often gets overlooked, because people will come here and usually it's, I went to Micah and then I left, or I went to Micah and then I stayed, or what have you. And I always try to get down to, if that's the common thing, just being very general here, I want to kind of get down to, like, all right, what's the difference with why someone stayed? Did they get that accessibility? Did they get that sense of community? Or was it something they just weren't getting here? And it's always interesting to see what it is, because usually I'm hearing that common theme of there's community, it's accessibility, and depending on what you want to do. Like, some people feel like I need to quickly grow. I need to chase this dragon. And then suddenly they're no longer a artist with ties to Baltimore. It's like, oh yeah, I was discovered in New York or discovered here. And I think it depends on what the person is looking for, because as you touched on, you can move up pretty quickly here, but Baltimore is still Baltimore. Baltimore isn't New York. Baltimore isn't California, but isn't Los Angeles or whatever these other larger markets are, because that's just not what it is. But you can get your stuff seen, and you can be part of a sense of community. You can be within a community, and you can do very well here, I would imagine. In terms of advice, like, what's a piece of advice that you wish you'd maybe gotten like 10 years ago, if not a little longer ago, that you feel like, I wish I knew that earlier?
You're asking me this question like at the end of a work day.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I don't know if it's like a piece of advice that I wish I had gotten so much as advice that I keep returning to and I keep giving myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
And okay, I'm going to go with one that I was given, and then another that like I kind of keep returning to is like in my own mind. And so one would be like somebody who had been on my thesis committee in graduate school, like in that like little final meeting where, you know, you kind of tie it all up into a little bow. As things were ending, he had said to me, like, and this was like thinking, you know, that like, yeah, maybe I might go into academia. I work at a K-12 school, not at the college level at this point, but, you know, sort of thinking about me and my personality and what that might be like in academia. And he just sort of said, like, you know, you have this like enthusiasm and like joy for life, and schools and educational institutions might like try to get rid of that to make you seem more serious. And he said, like, that's actually like, that's not a good thing. Like, be who you are and be your authentic self. And that's what's more important. And I don't feel that way at my school at all. I feel like I can show up and be my true self. But it is something that I sort of think about in a lot of spaces of like, you know, like where can you show, like, I want to be able to be in spaces where I can show up and be my own authentic self. And so that's sort of like something that had been given to me, but sort of things that I tell myself, art wise, you know, you're always sort of like chasing the next thing. Like, okay, well, what's my next project? What's my next show? What's the next thing that I'm going to do? And, you know, sometimes a lot's going on and sometimes not as much as going on. And so I think the thing that I always like sort of tell myself is that it's just important to show up and do the work, right? Like, it's important. Yeah. Those things will come afterwards, but I'm a pretty disciplined, I have a pretty disciplined studio practice, for somebody with a full-time job and a family. And that's just like an important thing for me to do, is to just like, to show up in the studio and show up in the act of making, even when it's hard, or even when it's like my work desk is also, we now live at work, right? We don't work from home. We live at work. So like my studio desk is also my live at work desk from home. So it's a little, I got my second monitor up here just in case. And like, but I can still construct stuff on it, right? Like I can still find a place and a time to show up and make stuff.
Yeah, it's important to feel comfortable and be able to be yourself and be engaged in what you're doing. And I think that's a really good thing to kind of check in with yourself on and recognize it. It's just like, why am I doing this again? That's the thing. It's like, do I enjoy this? Am I being myself here, or am I putting up a front? Because I think when you're being yourself, you enjoy it more, I think. And you don't feel like there's some weird, like, just parameter, because eventually the real you is going to creep out, and it's just going to be like, hey, I got questions about these vests or whatever, you know? So, I mean, like, I do it because I work in higher ed in a like a data capacity, and I tried just to be quiet because I know the real Rob is going to creep out. And I was like, all right, let me not say something snarky and subversive. And it's really hard not to. So, and I find when that comes out, and usually it's in response to something that's going there, or a certain practice that doesn't make sense, and it's something I have to work in. I was like, well, I should articulate this in this way. and this makes sense. I should be authentic and true to what I'm trying to do here. And I find when I'm not doing that, even in the creative space, like I used to try to put on an act in the front when I'm doing a podcast or what have you. And one of the comments that I've gotten about this particular podcast is, you sound like you're actually a real person. You're actually having a conversation with someone instead of, so back in 2010, when this happened, it's like, that's not what I do. I try to have a real conversation with someone. I'm going to say things that don't make sense. I'm going to get caught in my own thoughts, but I try to get a genuine conversation out of someone. And I think that's what hooks people. I think that's what attaches people to what's happening here in these types of conversations. So in terms of visualizing a project, and do you see it beforehand? Do you see pieces of it beforehand, finished product, or is it just, like wabi sabi? It's like, as we're going through it, this is what I'm seeing as it's materializing as you're working on it. How does that work for you?
So I'll talk about a couple things. So for example, like with the Chroma project, we certainly know that there's going to be a lot of objects, and together we might plan how big it is, what the edges are going to be like. Is it going to go all the way to the edge of the space, or is it going to kind of like fade out and be a little bit more irregular? And we might plan, does the color transition go top to bottom or left to right or right to left? Where do we put the value shift, right, from dark to light? And so we'll plan out something like that. And in that sense, we would know what it's going to look like, but you don't really know what it's going to look like until you put all the things in place. But in the studio right now too, I've been making these really small collages based on the photos that I take. And so those are really intuitive, right? I'm cutting, I'm pasting, I'm looking at different relationships next to each other. Trying to make sense of these images, but I don't know what it's going to look like ahead of time. I don't sit down and go, I know I need to put the balloon here next to the photograph I took of the road, so the balloon looks like next to the asphalt. Like I don't think about that. Yeah. Like I'm feeling that out, but I am also making these small paintings based on those, and so those have those exact compositions, and I certainly know exactly what the composition is going to be. And I might think ahead of time, like, oh, this area is going to be really flat, or this area is going to have this color, or I'm going to be more washy or painterly in that space. But so they can be both, and they can be really planned, or they can be way more intuitive.
That's good. It's like, again, it's good. As much as this podcast is for listeners, it's really for me. It's really for me to understand what creatives do so I can rip it off. So in my last question, because, I'm acknowledging how the day has gone for both of us, for my last question. So let's say in this scenario, and I say this frivolously, if you had to switch your creative calling to another one, what would it be and why?
Oh, okay. So but it has to be like a creative calling, right? Like,
yes.
Because I think it is, but it's also both. I think I'd be an event planner. Okay. I get like nervous around events. Like I don't actually like the event happening, but I really like to plan it, and I like the party stuff, and I like the decor. I feel like there's like a weird wedding planner that might be in me, which is weird because like we had a very large wedding people wise, but a very small wedding spectacle wise. We had our reception at have you been to the Baltimore Streetcar Museum?
Yes.
Yeah. We were very excited because we were like, we don't need to decorate because it's just full of like weird trade dioramas. So that to me seemed like that was perfect. So I didn't like go all out with like the fluff and the color and all that. Like I was just like, this is perfect. But I think I would like to do that for other people. And I have done prom planning in my job. I've planned 3 proms. I've planned more than 3 proms, but like I planned several proms, but three major. Been involved, but like anyway, there's prom planning. But you're not going to ask me about the superhero?
You know what? You want the superhero? Yeah, let's get it. Let's go. So All right. So if you could be a superhero, what would your superhero's power be?
My superhero power, I would have two, Rob. I would have two. And one would be the ability to shoot rainbows, like from like if I needed to, like from my hand, or like laser eye rainbows, or like fly through the air with like rainbow behind me. I feel like that seems kind of on brand, and I would really like Definitely. That. And then my other superpower that I want the power of what I thought chameleons would do when I was a child, and how because I thought that you would just put them somewhere and I thought they would automatically change to their surroundings, or that I thought that they could like change at will to new colors. Like if they wanted to be like, if they wanted to suddenly have dots or a crazy pattern, I thought that chameleons could do that. That's not exactly, they can change pigment, but it doesn't work like it did in cartoons as a child. But that is a power I would like.
One, both of those are great powers. Two, I would like a power. I already have a name for my superhero, by the way, the Manifestor. I want an ability to take negative self-talk and deflect it, a la Bishop from X-Men, and turn it into positive affirmations. You're not good. I disagree, but also
what's it called again?
Valid.
What's it called? You even have a name? I don't have names for these yet. What is your name? This is the Manifestor?
Yeah, the Manifestor. Like negative self-talk comes to me, and I redirect it to positive manifestation. Yes, put it in the universe.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad.
That may be what I'm doing right now, actually. So thank you for coming on to the podcast again. Please, shamelessly plug your social media, your website, all of that good stuff.
Okay, so Christine Buckton Tillman, all one word, because that is my maiden name and my last name together. Because back in the early days of the internet, as I was a newlywed, newly minted MFA, all within 2 years of each other, there was a marathon runner named Christine Tillman. So I included my maiden name, which is also what my grandmother told me to do. Like in terms of like that was her advice, not for the internet, but like that I should do the maiden name as middle name. So Christine Buckton Tillman. And so at ChristineBucktonTillman.com, and then also my Instagram is also Christine Buckton Tillman.
That's it. I'm gonna do my wrap up. And again, thank you for coming on to the podcast. This has been great. I'm glad we were able to get this in today. So I'm Rob Lee for Christine Buckton Tillman, saying there is art in and around Baltimore. You just got to look for it.